I'll tell you, we talked a couple weeks ago, first time I taught this class, I don't grow easy. Well, today's a little more pressure on myself. We have a man sitting in class that is very capable, and maybe one of the best teachers I've sit in one of his classes. And I don't know if he knows I have that much admiration for his abilities, but that would be King Jackson. And he's very talented, very gifted at teaching. He made a career of it, and I know he or she were talking to him a little before class. If you don't know the Jacksons, take a minute. They're good people, and we're blessed to have them with us. And so today, we know. I said this last time. It seems like every time I get asked to do something like this, whether it's for the youth class, for now even adult classes, you're always going to get more out of a lesson that you teach because you spend more time in it than what the class typically does. This one, I'm going to be sitting with my feet up here on the desk or on the chair because it's going to step on my toes and it may step on your toes. So just be ready, all right? And if it does step on your toes, blame Sean. Okay, so last week, Doug took us through Paul's first missionary journey. And this week, we're kind of in that in-between time. And opening question, consider a relationship problem that you have that you're going through or that you have gone through. What healed that relationship? What are some of the key factors of healing relationships? Honesty. Forgiveness. That's a tough one. So.
Humility.
And forgiveness is not, I forgive you. It's, I forgive you today, and tomorrow I'll forgive you, and the next day I'll forgive you. And I'll include myself in the one who needs forgiveness, but I'll keep forgiving you every day. It doesn't stop.
Yeah, I can't say communication. Humility and forgiveness, in my mind, they're kind of tied at the hip, aren't they? It's really hard to offer that forgiveness if you don't have the humility to go along with it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll be honest with you, I struggle with that. Struggle with that a lot. Judy will attest to you, I like being right. And so what else? Is there anything else that we're missing there? Love. Yeah, I think that's kind of the root of all of it. Because if you don't love that person, I don't think you're going to see any of it to get to that reconciliation. So Jesus talked about all of these things kind of wrapped up in Matthew 5:21. He says, You've heard that it was said from the old that you should not murder, and that whoever murders is liable to judgment. But I say to you that everyone who is angry with his brother will be liable to the judgment. And whoever insults his brother will be liable to the council, and whoever says you fool will be liable to the hell of fire. So if you're offering gifts at the altar and remember that you have something against your brother, or your brother has something against you, leave your gift there before the altar and go first reconcile to your brother and then come offer it at the altar. Have you ever really stopped and thought about that? God is our Almighty, right? And our worship, our sacrifices, everything we need to get to be reconciled with Him, comes through a sacrifice. In the Old Testament, it was at the altar. Thankfully for us, in the New Testament, it was his son Jesus, right? But he says, if you're at the altar, and I remember Pierce has done something against me, and I've got a problem with Pierce, I'm not even to approach the altar. I'm not even supposed to go to God until I get what Pierce and I have between us resolved. Have you ever thought about that? That's how important it is to God that we're right with our brothers. So we've elapsed some time since Paul, Barnabas, and Luke went on the first journey, right? So this is about 3 years later. They're going to go on Paul's going to go on another missionary journey that's going to last him about 3 years. He's going to visit 12 different locations, including some of the churches, and during this time, he's going to write letters to some of the churches that's going to compile a good part of our New Testament. And he's going to cover 2,800 miles. So it's kind of funny, Sean was talking about his first missionary journey was 1,400 miles, and he equated that from Lubbock to Sacramento, California. Well, he picked Sacramento, California again. From Sacramento, California to New Jersey. It's 2,841 miles. There weren't any airplanes back then. There weren't even any cars. You know, that's a lot of miles to cover, even in a 3 year span. Me being the goofy guy that likes numbers, you know, that he's averaging 2.5 miles a day just on his journey. You know, so, and that's what not even stopping the talking, but just average over 3 year span of 2,800 miles, 2.5 miles a day. So he wasn't exactly sitting still. So, because you know he spent time, in quality time, in some of these places. So, our primary text is going to be Acts 15, chapter 15, verse 36 and 41. Does somebody want to read that for us? 15:36 through 41.
After some days, Paul said to Barnabas, "Let us return and visit the brethren in every city in which we proclaim the word of the Lord and see how they are." Barnabas wanted to take John, called Mark, along with them also. But Paul kept insisting that they should not take him along, who had deserted them at Pamphylia and had not been with them to the work. And there occurred such a sharp disagreement that they separated from one another, and Barnabas took Mark with him and sailed away to Cyprus. But Paul showed solace and left after being committed by the brethren to the grace of the Lord. And he was traveling through Syria and Cilicia, strengthening the churches.
So we're back to Paul and Barnabas, right? Well, Saul and Barnabas was the two called out for the first missionary journey, right? What's going on here? There was a sharp disagreement. Wasn't Barnabas the one that went into Jerusalem and got Saul at the time because the Pharisees were looking to kill him? Barnabas kind of brought him into the fold with the apostles, didn't he?
Yeah.
And it always seems to me like Paul's being the one being stubborn there. No, we don't want to take him. We're not going to take him again. He left us the last time. And Barnabas is always the encourager, wanting to bring people in and include and show what good people have with them. And so it always seems to me like Paul's the one who's being super stubborn.
Well, and kind of along those lines, kind of what got me was Barnabas is a key to a lot of Paul's success. But we really don't hear that much about Barnabas. I mean, yeah, we hear about what he's doing here and disagreeing with Saul, but Barnabas goes one way, Paul goes another. We have Paul's journey very well documented. What about the rest of Barnabas's journey? Just one of those curiosities that come up during this for me. Sorry, I digress. So,
Well, but you wonder, did God harden Paul's heart a little bit right there because the work multiplied? Now you've got 2 sets of missionaries going out instead of 1.
You did this to me last time, and now she's doing it to me. Yeah, did you get this? The threat material? So yeah, no, that's very true. We're gonna get into that, and I was thinking too. Paul and Barnabas have this disagreement, and there's a lot of questions that we're going to get into about that. But it did split them up. It did multiply the work. Hasn't that happened before? And wasn't Paul one of the major contributors of the splitting up in his persecution of the first century church?
I think it goes to show too that just because we're, brothers and sisters in Christ, like it's not all rainbows and lollipops, like you're not gonna, when we were, my family was missionaries in Thailand, and I remember there being over the years a couple that people just they were hard to deal with, and so, they're still brothers in Christ, and it's just like, not all personalities are gonna match and stuff, and maybe sometimes that's just the best thing. Like we have the same message, but we can't seem to deliver it together. So you go your way and I'll go mine.
And that's okay.
Yeah, that's better than fighting each other and somebody saying, "Well, don't when you come to me," and like that's exactly right. That's fine. That's better to do it that way.
Kind of another curious thing is this is really the only thing we know about this disagreement. It happened. That's all we know about the disagreement. But we know some things about Barnabas and Paul. One of the things that we know is that they both love God very much. And we know that they were both passionate in using their gifts to spread the gospel. And you got to be passionate to set out on journeys like these men are taking on, about, and they're just circling back around because, I haven't seen Pierce in a while, so I don't keep picking on you today. Sorry. So I'm going to walk over to his house. Well, Pierce's house is like 3 blocks from my house. It's not that big of a deal, But they're going back to see their brothers that they work with in these places.
But they also, aren't they sent out by the same group of Christians?
They are.
And so this didn't cause in the city, an east side and west side congregation.
Right.
They are still working together and supported by the same.
That's exactly right. And everybody keeps taking my point. We're in a short class. So, it's all good. And to that point, we also know that neither men left the ministry. They went different routes, but they didn't leave the ministry, and they didn't leave. Much less they didn't lose their faith either. So.
And maybe because Mark went with him, that's why we have the book of Mark. John Mark is the one who wrote Mark. And so to bring him back into their lives and back into, hey, we need you to write this down for us.
Right.
Maybe it's really one of those good things that it probably is. God made a bad situation good And that's what he does with all of our situations.
Yeah, we could say God multiplied the situation that the devil was seeking to destroy through the dispute. So, because it's pretty obvious that that's exactly what's going on. Is the devil is trying to thwart what's going on there. So who was wrong in that disagreement?
Neither.
Neither, yeah.
Both? Neither? Yeah, I mean, I think there's good arguments either way. Neither one. So,
element of pride to it. I mean, there always is, you know, that it's probably one or both of them doesn't want to admit they're wrong. And so instead of just going to blows over it, they, you know, they're going to agree to disagree and go on. There's times that has to happen.
Or really maybe there wasn't a right or it was just two different sharp opinions.
there's always gonna be a right.
They could have both.
No. How long have you been married?
They could have both been right though, right? With their final, well, they were. I mean, if you, to me, like they were both right because they both decided to separate and stay brothers.
Yeah,
Because it wasn't Barnabas that Paul had the problem with, it was Mark.
Yeah.
and I can kind of see Paul's point. Because traveling back then was not as easy as throwing your stuff in the car and making sure you're full of gas, full of oil. It was like Doug talked about last week, it was dangerous, especially some of the places that they were traipsing off in between. So I kind of see Paul's point. Ron left me in the middle of a motorcycle ride and had to, I don't know if I want to ask him to go on the next one. I'm motorcycle. We're working on it.
Yay.
So,
Just like Bill was talking about this morning, you don't know the backstory. You know, you don't know what Barnabas saw in John Mark that maybe somewhere way back, somebody didn't give him the chance that he wished he'd had. You know, you never know what motivates people to stand by somebody like that. But it's like Elizabeth mentioned, you know, that's what we hear about him, just son of encouragement. He's constantly finding the good, and I think he still believed there was something in Mark that was worth fighting for and going with, and that's why he did it.
well, I'm going to jump ahead a little bit here. In 2 Timothy, chapter 4, he's writing to Timothy, obviously. And he says, Luke alone is with me. Get Mark and bring him with you, for he is useful to me in the ministry. So, if Paul had a problem with John Mark, it's long gone. And I don't know that he ever really had a problem, so to speak, with him. He just didn't want him to get bail on him again. Just kind of mean, but you know, I mean, that's being a Paul admirer from afar. That's pretty high praise. That Paul's going to say, hey, you know, bring him to me because he's useful to me. And I think it's kind of funny that he's writing to Timothy and telling him to bring John Mark because I guess maybe he already knows Timothy's coming. So, but he doesn't seem to be as excited that Timothy's coming. Hey, but make sure you bring this guy with you because he's useful to me.
Well, weren't Barnabas and John Mark cousins? I think they were cousins, and so that makes it a family thing as well.
You're getting into the lineage there, and that just makes my head spin. So
I think so, I can run this.
We'll just assume you're right and agree that you're right and go on. Yeah, those lineages get kind of deep and complicated and kissing cousins and second cousins and all that real quick, so. So Paul is, so was it you, Pierce, talking about him being, or was it you, Ken, talking about him being the encourager? I forget which one you was talking about, Ken. So, yeah, and Paul is too. You know, that's what a lot of his, I think that's the reason there's such a liking of reading Paul's writings, is because he's usually very encouraging. He'll get down in the weeds too if he needs to, but, and in one of the, in Ephesus, when he's writing to Ephesus, in chapter 4, verse 26, it says, be angry and do not sin. Do not let the sun go down on your anger. And give no opportunity for the devil. Do you think he had that knowledge back here whenever he and Barnabas are having their dispute? I don't think he did. You know, he's pretty solid in the word and his apostleship at this point, right? So maybe he was.
It also seems like it was a deal and then it just worked itself out. And of course, I know a lot of details are probably left out, but it does seem like, okay, they had their disagreements, they came to a conclusion, they moved on.
It wasn't a disagreement. It was a sharp disagreement.
Okay, sharp disagreement.
Well, I say that just because it was significant enough to be written down in the book of Acts, to be noted. You know, that this was, I don't think this was just you know, you're an idiot for wanting to take John Mark, I'm going this way. I mean, because it talks about it being a sharp disagreement.
But why was it written down? We need examples of how you work through things. We don't need to see that, like Chris was saying, everything's rainbows and sunshine and everything's just going to be great because we're all Christians. There's times we are going to disagree. And how do we deal with that? And it's just, it doesn't make light of it. It just says they disagreed. They disagreed sharply and they kept on serving, you know.
And you grow up a lot. I mean, you think about the difference in you right now as a 30-year-old and a 50-year-old. You know, you just think experiences make you grow, and disagreements with people and all the bad things that happen grow you up.
Yes.
And make you wiser and gentler as you go, I think.
Yeah, and I don't think you realize how often you're going to pull on those times that you were 30 when you're 50. Not 50 yet, she's really close. But if I said it once, I said it 100 times to Tyler. You don't get to 49 without being 25. You just don't do it. And I know, because he said so for the longest time, that made no sense to him. And then after he got married, he told me, like, okay, Dad, that's starting to make a little more sense to me now. I'm like, okay, good. You know, because you don't. And yeah, there's things that are different, but there's a whole lot of things that aren't. You know, so how testosterone affects the male mind will never change. So, yeah.
Sadly, you're correct.
Do what?
I said, sadly, you are correct.
Right. That row they're hoeing may be a few rows over, but it's in the exact same field that we hoed ours in. So, you know, so, all right. So in this verse in Ephesians, he says, be angry and do not sin. There's a lot of pressure out there to think that being angry is sinful. But there's a few verses in the Bible that are pretty clear that it's not. We'll go straight to the temple of Jesus. Pretty sure he was angry. He was throwing tables over, which I've never done in anger. Which sounds like it'd be fun.
There's testosterone.
Do it.
There's that testosterone.
Right. But and it wasn't just one, it was all of them. Everybody that was selling something, he went through their table over. So I believe he was sinless. So he that being angry was not simple, right? Pretty easy correlation there.
And Moses threw down the 10 Commandments. He threw down all of God's work. He'd written them on those stones and he just threw them down because he was so mad. And then he had to go back up and he had to do it all over again. That wasn't simple. It was terrible. It wasn't simple.
So I'll just tell you, I struggle with the second part of that verse. Do you not let the sun go down in anger? I don't always struggle with it. But if it's somebody I really care about, I struggle with it. If it's somebody that I don't care so much about, by the time you're out of sight, I'm usually probably over it. But am I really over it? Or am I just going on about life?
I'd have to say Marie's, as far as our relationship, Marie's always been fantastic about that. I mean, just, and I'm not trying to embarrass you, just the value of it, like there's been many times where I know where she was right, and just humble herself and cause it's damaging, I mean, I think that's how, he says it, that gives the devil a foothold, and it's not just in marriage, but it's like in everything. It's just, and it's hard for me to say, okay, I forgive you, and then lay there and still stew over it, I'm like, okay, do I or don't I, but if she would have, we call it scenario building, but like if she had never come to me, like I would have all these scenarios going. I wouldn't sleep. I'd have all these scenarios in my mind. So I mean, and I just think that's such a beautiful verse, I mean, I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't go to somebody. No, just kidding.
It can be hard. Because it kind of goes back to that first question we talked about, and that humility. That's not always a tasty piece of pie to eat. Not from a physical standpoint. Obviously, from a spiritual standpoint, we're told to be humble countless times in the Bible. I think a lot of us can empathize with where you're coming from there. So one of the interesting things on this is, Paul very much puts a time limit on how long you can be angry. Like, okay, you can be angry, go be angry, get it done, be done with it. And I just had that thought, it's like, it's usually later in the day when I get mad at somebody, so that shortens my time I get to be mad. And I want to stew on it for a little while. So, and Pierce, you touched on another point that we're going to bring up, and that is the point that gives the devil a point to attack and to start causing that separation between you and God. So So we already talked about Paul calling for Timothy, you know, so for Mark, he's over whatever it was at the beginning of the trip, you know, so apparently he prescribed his own recipe, so. And that's, a lot of people don't deal with conflict at all, and it's inevitable. We're gonna have conflict. You're gonna have conflict with your spouse, you're gonna have conflict with your children, coworkers, people at church. You know, so being able to work yourself through that conflict in a godly way is crucial, especially with those that are closer to you. Have any of y'all read the book The Peacemaker by Ken Satan? Well, in that, I haven't read it either, just to be completely honest. But Sean has. So, in that, he's got the 4 G's of conflict resolution. And the first G, somebody read 1 Corinthians 10, verse 31.
Verse 31.
Yes, 10:31.
So whether you eat or drink or whatever you do, do it all for the glory of God.
First G, conflict resolution.
Keith,
Glorify.
is that a thicker pen that's sitting down there on the ledge? Cause it's really hard to see and I'm sure
Oh,
online
maybe
they probably
so,
can't
yeah.
see it. I know they talk about getting some. Just make sure it's dry erase before you use it. Oh, good to know.
And I'm sorry, but there's a little unknown fact. You can take a Sharpie permanent marker and write on the board. You can take an Expo marker, write over it and erase it. So,
So this is called 4 G's to conflict resolution?
yep.
Okay.
Glorify God. That's the first one. Somebody read Matthew 7, verse 5. Everybody's gonna know this verse.
You hypocrite, first take the plank out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye.
Get the log out. Get the log. And I'm sorry, I've always literally imaged that in my mind. And I just laugh every time I think about it. You know, trying to get a splinter out of Judy's finger, thinking about having a log in my eye, you know. but it's a great analogy. So, and that log could be something really little, but it's something that you need to take care of before you go to your brother, go to your wife, go to your husband, and try to get conflict resolution. Matthew 5:24.
Leave your gift there before the altar and go. First be reconciled to your brother and then come and offer your gift.
Go and be reconciled. that one easy?
Sometimes that one takes more time.
Mm-hmm. And it takes a lot of that word that we were talking about earlier, right? That humility. And that one can be scary. Because I may not know John that well. I may not know how he's going to react. I don't know if he's going to have forgiveness for me that I need. That one can be real scary. This one is maybe the next one that I struggle with, maybe even more. So Galatians 6, verse 1.
Brothers and sisters, if a person is caught doing something wrong, you who are spiritual should restore them like this with a spirit of gentleness.
Gently restore. I'm sorry for the chicken scratch. They had a aptitude test with handwriting. I think that'd be a doctor. So, but gently. That's something I usually struggle with, is gentleness. I think a lot of that comes down to I confess to y'all that I like being right, and sometimes that gentleness and being right, they just not gonna go along, and you can't do both sometimes. So glorify God, get the log out, go be reconciled. And I think it's kind of curious that we use this verse in Matthew on the go that we were talking about earlier. We're supposed to go even if we're at the altar. And I remember they got a problem with Pierce, right? Or Pierce has a problem with me. I'm supposed to leave it right there. Go to it. That's how much this reconciliation means to God. And then gently restore. So there's your 4 G's of reconciliation.
I mean, that stuff, it's like, it's easy to read that stuff for me and not really, and just kind of to pass over it. But, like, you think about something like, what if, like you're using me as an example, but like I have my gifts, and, if I did have a problem with you, that you're 100% wrong and I'm 100, like, I let you borrow my truck to move, and it comes back with a big dent in it, and you're like, I don't know what happened, and that's, I'm supposed to go to you, and I'm in my, not just go to you, grip and grin and leave. I'm supposed to go to you and forgive you for this before, even though I know it's going to cost me whatever, $4,000 for a new door. That's, he's not saying, if everything worked like you guys work, it's like, I'm supposed to go to you and take care of it. And to me, I don't know, so much stuff I look at, it's easy just to read over it and not think it that big a deal. But I mean, it is like, just like you said in there, it was such a conflict that they had or such a disagreement, instead of, they disagree, but no, it's such a sharp one that they had to separate.
Yeah. And they wrote it down in the Bible too. So
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, Pierce, some people are better at being on one side or the other of that scenario. I hate being the one that's going to you with my tail between my legs. Man, I borrowed the pickup and I put this dent in it, we're going to get it figured out. I'd much rather be on the other side of that. being you coming to me because you brought my pickup, so. And I actually had that very similar scenario happen, and I actually felt horrible about it because I pretty much made a friend of mine take my pickup to Austin to move his younger brother back from Austin back to Lubbock. They get the pickup loaded with all of his brother's stuff, and they get about 50 miles out of Austin, the transmission of my pickup goes out. And he's feeling bad because he thinks he tore up my pickup, and he's worried how I'm going to react to it. Well, I'm feeling bad because now he's got his brother's stuff all loaded up on my pickup and a trailer, 250 miles, 300 miles away from where it needs to be, and my pickup quit working on him, so now he's got more trouble on top of the task he had on hand, so. All right, so, hey,
But
we're just.
this is one of Satan's tools too, in that you can say, well, I went to them and I told them I forgive them. And they said, well, there's nothing to forgive, nothing. And so they're still wrong. I forgave them. And so, we can get a little snotty here saying, well, I forgave. And they didn't accept my forgiveness. And Satan's over there going, yeah.
Yep, and that's very true. And I think a lot of us have no idea how really truly to forgive. And it is very hard.
And sometimes when we feel like we need to forgive, actually we need to be forgiven.
Yep. And that'll lead us down into a whole nother class, maybe even a whole nother series of those stuff about how that separates us from God right there. Not forgiving. So Sean is very good at providing some thoughts for the week and some prayer ideas, and his prayer idea is very simple this week. And I think it's one of those very simple but can be very powerful. And it's, pray this prayer this week, if you will. Give her peace. Help me be a peacemaker. It's going to make you be intentional, isn't it? Intentional about bringing peace. Doesn't necessarily have to be you and other people that you have problems with. It could be, Pierce and John. I know they're fixing to have some problems. Pierce hurt John's feelings this morning. So, and he gave a memory verse, and when I first kind of saw this, I was like, this is kind of elementary, isn't it? And he, in the class prep, he kind of punched me between the eyes. He said, my goal with the memory verse is to write the word of God on our hearts. I was like, ooh, I feel like an idiot and a jerk. And so, somebody have Romans 12:18. If possible, so far as it depends on you, be at peace with all men. And he chose to write down in the notes the International Children's Bible Version. And at first, they're giving us kind of like, okay, we're going back to Children's Bible. But it's really kind of simple. It says, do your best to live at peace with everyone. It's like, yeah, how well does that sum it up? And you heard the everyone, right? That kind of stings every once in a while. So, and then Sean's meditation thought for the week. What conflicts in your life need to be resolved? How can you begin healing and reconciling those conflicts? And the challenge kind of goes along with those. The challenge is make a priority this week to go to the person that came to mind when you first heard the word conflict in the beginning of the process of forgiveness. So I know I have some people that come to mind, and I was telling Judy whenever I got this prep material, I was like, really? Really? I'm gonna have to teach this lesson? Really? So it's been good that I've had to go through this. So, anything
We can just
else?
meet after class.
Do what?
We can just meet after class.
We're good, buddy.
Oh, wait, well, you're the one on my list, man.
Oh,
Okay.
okay. I'm sorry. All right, I'm not being like Doug. We're actually gonna wrap up before the bell. So thank you for your participation. Thanks for all your comments.
Thanks, Keith.